Hi friends, welcome back to my channel, and welcome to my vlog reading all of the Throne of Glass series. So for context, I have attempted to read Throne of Glass in the second book. I gave Throne of Glass 2 stars. I didn't even finish the second one, I DNF'd it. But like everybody else, I'm a little bit obsessed with Sarah J. Maas. There's something about her world, her writing, that is just so captivating. So after I read Crescent City Book 2, House of Sky and Breath, I made the conscious decision, like everybody else in the book community, to go back and read her universe for reasons you may know if you've read it and reasons you probably still know if you are on the internet. So I am kind of a little bit iffy about how I want to read the series. I have Assassin's Blade, and when I look up reading order for this series, because I know that Assassin's Blade was published after the first 2 or 3 books in the series, I know some people say if you read it in publication order, or if you read Assassin's Blade first because it's considered a prequel by Miss Janet herself. I don't know what I'm gonna go with, but I've started Assassin's Blade. So I guess that's me saying that I'm starting with Assassin's Blade. I have like the 8-book bind up because on ebook, and then I also got the books from my library because I just consume fantasy physically better. I'm just now starting this, and I will we'll get into my feelings about it when I'm done and have an update for you. Okay, so I finished Assassin's Blade, and I didn't really feel the need to update you each individual story because there wasn't really a whole lot to say per. The first story is The Assassin and the Pirate, and this is about Sam and Celeana, who are part of the Assassins guild, and Celeana is the protege to the guy that runs it, Aelin. And Aelin has sent them on a mission to go see a guy named the Pirate King, who is supposed to be the pirate of all pirates. They're sent there unbeknownst to them to move a slave shipment, and so they basically outwit the Pirate King and free the slaves, and it ruins the deal with Aelin and the Pirate King for this slave trade. So we start The Healer, The Assassin and the Healer, which starts with Celeana traveling from the city that the Assassin's Guild is the headquarters at, traveling to the Red Desert as punishment for ruining this trade deal with the Pirate King for Aelin. And she is going to the Red Desert to go train at this Assassin's Academy that is run by this guy called the Mute Master of Assassins. And while she is there, she's staying at this inn in a town called Inish. I know, super clever. And she meets a woman who is a barmaid there, and she comes from a line of healers. And so we get 2 points of view. I believe this is the only time in this collection where we consistently get different points of view outside of Celeana's. We get points of view of her recounting her life leading up to how she became a barmaid, including how she was a healer with her mom and her grandma, and how her village was slaughtered, her mom was slaughtered for being a healer by the king's guard. And the healer gets into kind of a scuffle. She's about to be assaulted, and Celeana ends up saving her, teaches her some self-defense. And again, this is another instance of Celeana doing something selfless. So then we get to the third story, which is The Assassin in the Desert, and this is Celeana in the Assassin's Academy in the Red Desert, being trained with these other assassins, hoping to be trained with the Mute Master, because Aelin told her if she gets a letter from the Mute Master with his recommendation or his approval in the month time span that she's been given, then she can come back and everything will be good to go. And this is really the first indication of Celeana's arrogance that we get. It's solidified for us that like Celeana very much thinks she's the best assassin to ever exist, and she gets to this assassin school and no one really knows who she is. They know of her, they've heard her name before, but no one is really impressed with her, no one is looking to her, no one looks up to her. Like, she's very off-put by the idea that these people don't know who she is and that they're not falling all over themselves to know her and to interact with her. And so despite this possibly being a humbling experience for her, this isn't the part of the story that humbles her. She grows pretty close to this girl named Ansel, and then at the end of the novella, she ends up getting drugged and sent away by Ansel, and she finds out that Ansel has turned against the Mute Master and all of the other assassins and is planning on overthrowing the school and killing everybody. In The Assassin in the Empire, we see her going back to the headquarters, and she kind of confronts Aelin, but Aelin immediately ropes her back in, manipulates her with gifts and with pretty words, and like emotionally manipulates her. So she starts working with Sam again, and they start doing things for Aelin. And one of the tasks that they have set for this short story, she's told that a previous queen of a land that the king of Aelin has taken over is planning to go to the king of Aelin and propose that he allow her to open a trade route. And she suspects that her ex-husband is planning on using that trade route to traffic slaves, and she thinks that he has a list of people that are against the slave trade, and that her ex-husband is going to give the list to the king to get rid of the people that are opposing the king's wishes, I guess. And so Celeana and Sam are tasked with killing the ex-husband, getting this list, and getting the documents that him and his partner have. At the end, they find out that it was all a lie from Aelin, and this is kind of the last betrayal for Celeana. She uses gold that the Mute Master gave her to pay off of all of her debts, and she tells Aelin that she is no longer in service to him, and she finds out that Sam's punishment was watching Celeana be beat, and also he would forgive Aelin if Aelin promised never to touch Celeana again. So this revelation sort of sparks a romantic relationship between the two of them. There had been inclinations that Sam had always kind of had feelings for her, and when they were separated after having to see Sam possibly being punished, she started to realize that she also had romantic feelings for him. At the beginning of the last story, which is The Assassin in the Empire, Celeana and Sam are now living together in this apartment, and they aren't working for Aelin anymore, and they decide that they want to leave the continent, get out, and, you know, travel on their own and be out from under Aelin. And Aelin basically says in order for them to get out of the Assassin's Guild, which is something that he runs, they have to pay him all of the money that they have. And so Sam takes this contract, going to be a lot of money, to kill the crime lord and his second, and they are said to be like ruthless criminals. No one can kill them, like even Aelin is afraid to take them on. Sam goes there. Sam's gonna kill one guy, Celeana's gonna stay at home while he's doing that, and then Celeana's gonna kill the other guy. And then the night that he's supposed to do this killing, he doesn't come home, and Aelin shows up and says like he's dead. She goes to see the body, and then she falls into like a state of grief, and so she decides that she wants to break in, and she finds out that she has been tricked. She gets captured. She is given up to the king to withstand her trial. She ends up getting sentenced to 7 years of labor at the salt mines, and that is where the start of Throne of Glass is going to be. Overall, my opinions on this little novella set, I end up giving it 4 stars. In my initial read of the Throne of Glass series, my complaint was that Celeana is not nearly as badass as she claims or thinks that she is, and I definitely think that's true, but I'm glad that I read the novella book because I feel like it's given me some context into who Celeana is and her abilities. Like, I definitely think that some of the, like, arrogance is earned. I wouldn't say all of it. I definitely think she has more arrogance than she does sense, but I think without the context of this, I would still think that she had no basis for her skill. We saw little glimmers of Celeana not just being all about herself, but also I feel like she's selfless when it doesn't hurt her to not be so. We learned that she came from a place that the king of Aelin took over called Terrasen, but we don't really know too much about her backstory other than that. And I also got some context into how she was raised. Something that really stood out to me during the novellas was her relationship with Aelin is extremely disgusting. Like, I haven't really heard anybody talk about this, but there are several times in the novellas where she mentions that Aelin is sort of like a lover, which is weird because he takes her in when she's like 7, and in the start of the novellas she's 16 and he's an adult, presumably for her entire life. So now I'm going to start Throne of Glass. Watching videos of people reading this series, like, I know that the first 3 books are not that great, and while most of the time I would be of the mind, like, I'm not going to read 1,000 pages for nothing, I know her potential and I know how much I enjoy her stories once they're good. So I have finished the Throne of Glass, and I ended up giving this 3 stars, whereas previously I gave it 2 stars. And honestly, without the context of the novellas, I don't know if this would have gotten a 3-star. So essentially, this is about Celeana going to the capital, and she is participating in these trials to become the king's champion, which is basically just like the king's assassin. And there is one driving character, one like offense, I guess, against her in the trials, and he uses magic to summon demons to kill the other competitors. And then she ends up getting poisoned during the final thing, and then she gets saved by one of the old queens of Aelin, and her friend Naima used word marks / magic to summon the Queen of Aelin, who had previously had interactions with Celeana and helped her before. There isn't really too much impactful in this book, I would say. The glaringly obviously bad thing about this book is the failed love triangle, I guess is the best way to describe it. So there's Dorian, who is the prince, and then there is Cole, who is the captain's guard, or the guard's captain or something like that. And Cole is like Flat Stanley, he has 0 personality, and Dorian, he I think is an attempt to like the whole like bad boy player character, and he's just also kind of boring. So when you're in Celeana's head, she's like solving who's doing all of these killings, who's killing her competitors, she is trying to figure out what these word marks are, she is like trying to figure all this stuff out. And then we are in Dorian and Cole's point of view, and it's just like about how pretty she is. Getting into Crown of Midnight, which is the 2nd book, this is kind of where it slapped me in the face that Dorian just doesn't really see Celeana. So at the beginning of the book, we open with Celeana bringing the head of someone that she has been tasked by him to kill to the throne room to prove that she has killed this person. And there is this moment after she leaves where we're in Dorian's head, and he's basically like, who is she? I don't really know her. How could she do this? But it's like, what did you really think? Who did you really think that she was? Like, you knew she was an assassin. You knew that she was in this death camp for presumably killing people for some sort of crime. So like, what did you really expect? And also, what did you think that her role with your dad was going to be? Hopefully I will like this one. Like I said with Throne of Glass, I enjoyed it a whole lot more with the context of the novellas, and I'm finding that that's like the case because I know more about Celeana, and she doesn't seem to just be this annoying character. Like, this is my Goodreads review from when I initially read the book, and like, I still stand by all of that except the whole Cole part, but somehow I say that lovingly now because I actually enjoyed this book. as opposed to the first time I read it when I was not happy. So we will come back if something interesting happens in this. If not, we'll talk about it at the end. Okay, I'm 188 pages in, and I kind of just feel like Cole is a replacement for Sam. Like, they feel like the same character. So, like, at this point, her relationship with Dorian is, like, non-existent. And she is really good friends with Dorian. And now they've had this moment where she reveals to him that she actually hasn't killed anyone. And he's like, okay, we'll run away. The way that she's talking about him feels like how she talked about Sam. And it feels like he's a replacement for Sam, or, like, would give her the life that she dreamed up with Sam. And not, like, an actual life. I don't know, that's just kind of how I feel. Maybe it could be that Cole is, like, a non-existent character and doesn't really have, like, a super strong personality. And so, like, the little amount of characteristics that he does have remind me of Sam, because, like, Sam was the same way. He had, like, very little characteristics. But it just feels like he's the option for the Celeana that was meant to get out, I guess. So I finished Crown of Midnight last night, and I actually very much enjoyed this. I ended up giving this 4 out of 5 stars, which is very shocking for me. Sarah J. Maas does such a good job of, like, the last 100 pages just being so good, like, so entertaining, so gripping. So obviously the biggest reveal that we got is that Celeana is actually Aelin, the missing princess to the Terrasen royalty line or whatever, and she is Fae. To start, the whole thing that started, like, the plot line was that there's a carnival that shows up to the castle, and there's a woman there called Baba Yellowlegs, and she is purported to be a witch. There is, like, a witch kingdom, and there was the Croshan witches, and then there was the, like, Iron Teeth witches, and the Iron Teeth witches were a bunch of different bands of witches that came together. They slaughtered all the Croshan witches, and she shows up, and she kind of drops 2 pieces of information. So earlier in the beginning, like, towards the middle of the book, Dorian shows signs that he has powers. So he goes to Baba Yellowlegs and says, and she tells him that he has powers. And so he starts looking into his lineage, and he cannot find any evidence that anybody in his family line had powers. So it looks like someone wiped away all that information. Baba Yellowlegs also tells Celeana there was this thing called word gates, and they were essentially portals to other worlds, and the Valg, which is like this sort of demon thing, came through into their world and started, like, wreaking havoc, and the Valg made 3 keys to manipulate and open and close the portals, like, as they wanted. And then once the Valg were defeated, the 3 keys were given to Darian, I think, the first line of Halvards, whatever Dorian's line is. And so they think that the king has at least one of the word keys, and is using it to, you know, take all of these lands, because he took over a lot of kingdoms all at once, kingdoms that people would think were a lot stronger than the army that he had. She also found out that the Fae were the ones that got the keys back from the Valg, that the keys are pure power, and when combined would have, like, an unknowable power, like an unknowable amount of power. And she finds out that Nehemia, which is how you pronounce her name, knew about the keys, knew that the king might have a key, and she knew about this riddle down in the tomb of where Elena, the queen from in the first book, was helping Celeana. By the way, what is with these names? Elena, Celeana, Aelin, like, come on now. So she knew that there was a riddle down in that tomb, and she was hiding it from Celeana, and she was working with a rebel group, and she finds this out because there's a guy in the beginning of the book named Archer that the king tasks her with killing. She goes to him and says, like, the king thinks that you are a rebel, and I'm gonna give you, like, a month to get out of the city, but I need you to give me information, because he's like a courtesan, that has like pretty high profile people, including people that are like part of this rebel group. So he starts feeding her information, and at the very, very end, she finds out that Archer was actually the one. I didn't say this, I forgot to say this, but Nehemia gets killed. She finds out at the end that Archer is the one that actually hired Nehemia to be killed. It was all because Nehemia didn't agree with them using the word keys to take down the king. She wanted to just destroy them or like send them away so no one could ever access them again. This update is all over the place. I hope I'm making sense. In the catacombs is where like the final battle goes down or whatever. She figures out the riddle, figures out the word keys, and she figures out that there is a word key portal, like there's a word key combination that will open portals into other realms. She tries to open a portal to see Nehemia again, and Archer sees her opening this portal, and he takes the book that she was using, and when Celeana is trying to erase the mark so that he can't use it, she like fucks it up, and it opens a portal to seemingly some sort of like demon realm. So they're fighting this demon, and she ends up going through the portal, and this is when they discover that she's Fae. Cole decides to send her away to this kingdom that is like said to have Fae refugees, or be the last descendants of the Fae, to learn more about her heritage. And so at the end of the book, she's leaving to go there. Dorian is obviously still a crown prince. He now has these powers that he's trying to figure out. And Cole now knows that the king that he has been loyal to this whole time is not great. The last 100 pages were so enjoyable. The main predominant romance in this was between Cole and Celeana, and I alluded to, or I said in the previous clip, that he very much feels like Sam. I do still agree with that. Like, I don't think that Cole as his own character stands up very well. They start this like romantic and sexual relationship, and he ends up betraying her because he knows that someone is going to interrogate Nehemia, and he doesn't tell her, and then Nehemia ends up getting killed. He just feels like a romantic love interest and nothing else. I don't understand his personality or like his motivations, his backstory, because we don't really have any of that. At least in this one, Dorian, while it was boring, we got a little bit of like him learning about his magic and stuff. Cole, his point of view was still just all about Celeana. And now I'm excited to get into this book, Heir of Fire. I'm excited to see how it goes, but I ended up getting 140 pages into. I'm enjoying it so far, to the point where like I don't want to read other stuff. I want to just read this. So I took some notes. So we have a couple of different points of view in this one. So Celeana has now been sent to Wendlin, which is the kingdom that her mother is from, and it's like on a different continent than Aelin is. And she goes there on like this expedition to kill Prince or whatever, the royal family there. But she's actually there to meet Queen Maeve, who is one of the 3 like Fae queens, and it's like her great aunt, because her great grandmother is Queen Mab, who died and was like considered a goddess. She realizes that her cousin Aelin is the prince, and like everybody loves him, and so she gets there and she very much falls into like this depressive episode where she doesn't want to do anything. She just drinks and starts fights for weeks, and she's not really doing much. And then she's going to a tavern one day, and this fairy shows up, this fae man shows up and takes her away. She finds out this is Rowan. He is like hello? Hey. Okay, I don't remember what I was talking about. So she gets picked up by this guy named Rowan, and he takes her to see Queen Maeve, who is in like this tavern out in the mountains. She tells Celeana, Aelin, whatever the hell name she's going by right now, there's like 3, that if she wants to be deemed worthy to go into Dornell, which is like the fairy kingdom or whatever, then she's gonna have to train with Rowan to use her powers and then be deemed good enough. The other point of view, we have Cole, who is back in the kingdom, and he made a deal with his dad in the end of the last book that if he supports Cole's idea of sending Celeana away, that he will then go back to Aelin, whatever his kingdom is called, and be the prince there. And so he's fighting off his dad because he doesn't actually want to go back. And he's also he's trying to find out how to release magic that he knows the king has like found a way to stop. He is trying to figure out what the rebels are doing, and he's also trying to figure out what Aelin is doing. So Aelin is Celeana's cousin, and during the slaughter at Terrasen, he was kept alive, and he's now the war general in the north for the King of Aelin, and they don't really know why. Wants to find out what Aelin is doing in Rifthold. So he follows him around, and where I left off, he had followed him to meet a rebel group. Dorian, who is still in Rifthold, and he is trying to learn how to control his powers, and he has a possible love interest named Sorsha, who is a healer in the palace for the last 5 years. She's the one that's been healing them. So she kind of knows like about what's going on, and Dorian has like a thing for her, and then he ends up showing her one of his powers because he loses control when they're together one time. And then we have Manon, who is the heir to the Blackbeak witch clan, which is part of the Iron Teeth witches. So like there was a bunch of different witch clans that came together to kill the Croshan witches, and one of the clans is the the Blackbeak clan, which is Manon is the heir of, and the matron is her grandmother or her mother. And inside the Blackbeak, there's like her group of witches, which is called the 13th clan, and they're known for being very merciless, and they're like the mercenaries of the group, I guess, the clan. And they all get a notice from the King of Aelin asking them to come and be warriors in a war for him, and he wants them to be riders of wyvern. And once they finish the war with him, like once the war is over, they get to keep the wyvern. There has been some developments I think are of note, and I think the largest for me is the difference in Celeana. So like I didn't talk too much about this when I was talking about the first or the second book. After Nehemiah's death, what kickstarts Celeana's desire to kill the King of Aelin. Before, she wanted to be in the limelight. She wanted everybody to know who she was, and she gets to this training area with Rowan, and she is a scullery maid when she's not training with Rowan, and nobody knows who she is, and she makes several comments about how happy she is and how great of a change it is to not be recognized and to not have people following her around. And that's like a massive change in Celeana's personality, that she just doesn't want people to know her. She doesn't want people fawning all over her, and I think that was like the most notable thing that has stood out to me. This is exactly the sort of like story that I just need to consume me with, and that is something that Sarah J Maas is so good at, is just writing these stories that consume you and just feel like you have to be in them. So I'm definitely ready to get back into it. After a delicious, nutritious, heart-healthy lunch of s'mores, Pop-Tarts, and Greek yogurt, I am here ready to talk about the book I just finished. Okay, well, I actually finished this like 2 days ago, but I just didn't have the mental wherewithal to update you, and honestly, I don't really want to talk about it. I enjoyed this about as much as I enjoyed the second one, and I actually decided to bump the second one down to 3 stars, and I gave this one 3 stars too. I just realized that me personally as a rater, if I rate something as soon as I finish it, the last little bit of the story greatly influences the rating that I give it. And Sarah J Maas has very strong endings. I think that's part of how she keeps people invested in her stories, despite 80% of this being absolutely nothing. I don't think we learned really too much important here. The most notable things I have to say about this is Dorian's love interest we have like 4 scenes of them and or her, and then they kill her at the end for being a spy, and I didn't care. And I don't care about Dorian's like grief. And if we're gonna spend the next book with him having to, obviously he's going to be possessed, but once he comes out, if he's grieving her in any way, like, it's not gonna make any sense to me, and I'm not gonna care. And that's kind of how I felt about Dorian and Cole the whole time. I don't like Cole. I think he's boring. I think he's spineless. It basically took him almost dying and his best friend almost dying for him actually to give a fuck about other people. Like, this whole book, everything he's doing is for Dorian. You have such a greater role. You have such a massive role, power, influence in this world to make people's lives better. That's kind of the issue that I had with Celeana as well. She finds out that Nehemia died to light a fire inside Celeana, to get her to want to rebel, to get her to want to overthrow the King of Aelin, which it did. But even then, she knows this, and it still isn't good enough. Like, she still doesn't give a fuck. And it's annoying that the whole time she's like, I'm only doing this because I promised her. And she's not understanding the weight behind her powers and her position and who she is. And she's just very selfish. And it took Rowan quite literally beating her, punching her in the face, biting her, spitting on her, like beating her down for her to understand that this is about more than her. And I don't like the relationship with Rowan. Rowan to me is okay. Like, he's not my favorite. He's not the greatest. I don't think he's super well developed, fleshed out, anything like that. And I was appreciating the slow progression of them hating each other into friends. And then we went from friends to like fated companions way too quickly. There are several things that I enjoyed that I'm interested to see come to fruition, or how they're going to play out. So Manon as a character, incredibly interesting in my opinion. She is the Iron Teeth Witch, and she actually gets her wyvern. I think that's the last time I updated you. And the wyvern was actually a bait beast, so a wyvern that was too weak, and they were using them as bait for other wyvern. And she ends up saving him. Well, he saves her, and then they have like this connection. The majority of the book, after she gets her wyvern, is spent training him to become strong. But there's something very weird going on, because one day Manon is feeding Abraxas, her wyvern, some meat, and he will not eat it. And then she bites it and it tastes very weird. And then she gets it into an altercation with one of the guards, and she bites him, and his blood tastes very weird. And he tastes rotted from the inside out. And then at the same time that this is happening, the temple, or like the training ground that Celeana, Aelin, whatever, is staying at, there's like these deaths, these half-fays are showing up dead. And there seems to be like this really rotten smell around the corpses. And then the temple outpost, whatever, the outpost gets attacked by these very, 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 very strong beings that seem to be inhabiting humans. They figure out that these beings are the Valg. I don't know if I mentioned it in my previous clips, but the Valg are the creatures that came through the portals whenever the word keys, word gates, all of that were created. They're the demons that were opening portals and letting demon monsters and shit into whatever this world is called. And so she finds out that the king, who they suspect has 2 word keys, is letting in Valg, letting them take the bodies of soldiers and like just fuck shit up. So she ends up at the very end getting into a tussle with one of the Valgs, and she has been training the majority of this book. She has fire. She has the ability to wield fire, and she like blazes. And something that I enjoyed about this book, this is completely a side tangent from what I was saying, but something that I had previous complaints about with the ACOTAR series and with Crescent City, the main characters never do any training to like hone their powers, learn how to use their powers. And I appreciate that while it was boring, we had a lot of training of Celeana, Aelin. We're just going to call her Aelin, learning to use her powers, which I appreciated because it made more sense when the big battle came, when the big, like, action came and she used her powers. It made sense. She attacks the Valg, hulks out, uses her powers, kills them, they get the thing back, they fight back the soldiers, and she finds out that the word key, one of the word keys that she's been missing is in a talisman that her mom gave her the night that she died. And Arobynn has that talisman. That's kind of like all of the things that we learned. Really, at the end of the book, Dorian now has like a necklace on that lets the king control him. Cole has escaped. Aedion, I think it's actually, Aedion is how you pronounce it, Aedion. He is in the dungeons, and Celeana is on her way back to Rifthold to presumably get the talisman back from Arobynn. I made it sound a lot more interesting than it is, but like the majority of what we learn is the last 100 pages. I have talked a lot longer than I anticipated talking about this book. So we will talk later. Bye. I finished several days ago Queen of Shadows, and I'm ready to talk about it. So I did end up giving Queen of Shadows 4 stars. I enjoyed it more than I enjoyed the other books in the series. The series is definitely just getting like progressively better. In this book, quite a bit happens. So first off, Aelin uses Arobynn to get Aedion out of prison on his execution day. So there's this huge party, she disguises herself, pretends to be someone else, and then rescues Aedon, however you pronounce his name. So she rescues him, and then Rowan ends up coming to Rifthold to be with her. So we have the three. They end up teaming with Arobynn and also Cole, who is working with the rebels, to scheme and figure some things out about how they're going to get back to Terrasen and all of that. So over here with Arobynn, they are working to figure out how to get Aedon out. And once they break him out, part of the agreement was that Aelin would bring Arobynn a Valg for him to experiment on. And we ultimately end the Arobynn storyline with Lysandra killing Arobynn. So Lysandra is someone that we met in the first novellas, like the novellas in the Assassin's Blade. She was a courtesan who was a courtesan from an early age. Her and Aelin didn't have like the best relationship, but now Lysandra is owned by Arobynn essentially, and she ends up working with Aelin to kill Arobynn, and Lysandra and her kind of team up, and Lysandra has a girl who was brought in to be a courtesan that she actually scarred so that she couldn't be used, so she's kind of become her ward. So we have Lysandra, who is now working with Aelin. We have Rowan, who is in Rifthold. We have Aedon, who is now, I'm just going to call him Aedon, who is now back together with the gang, and they are trying to figure out how to get Celeana. They're trying to figure out how to get to Aelin to Terrasen. They have a run-in with Manon, who is making an exchange of Lysandra after she is kidnapped, and they make an exchange, and they end up getting Lysandra out and also running into Manon because the king is there with Manon and her 13 and her grandmother. So Cole sees that Dorian is not really him anymore, and he attempts to kill him, but they stop Cole from doing it, and then Manon and Aelin have sort of this tuffle that ends in Aelin saving Manon's life, so she owes her a life debt, and we get back to Rifthold, and this is kind of...
Okay, so this explanation makes no sense because because Cole and Dorian are so interchangeable in my head as characters that I literally changed up their names. So it happens that Dorian, Cole, Aelin, and the King of Aderlin are all in the throne room, and Cole sacrifices himself to make sure that Aelin can get away. Aelin runs, the King of Aderlin sends Dorian after Aelin, and they end up meeting on this bridge.
Aelin got a message from Manon earlier that during that scuffle between Manon and Dorian and all of them in that clearing, that Manon was talking to Dorian and saw Dorian in the back there. So she gets a message to Aelin and says, hey, don't kill him. So that resolves their life debt. And so Aelin tries to save Cole. And the way that she does this is she has a ring that is like pure light, essentially. I don't quite remember the details of that, but she puts the ring on Dorian, and he is able to come into his body enough to overcome the Valg. And then they have a final showdown with her father, or with his father. And this showdown results in the King of Aderlin revealing a bunch of things, including that he has been possessed by a Valg the whole time. The true ruler of Aderlin and the person doing all of this is a duke who seemed to be like in the background and was just kind of like a crony, but he actually is playing a much bigger role than we thought. That everything that he did, including killing Aelin's family or going to where Aelin was, putting the necklace on Dorian, and destroying magic, was all in an attempt to suppress the Duke's power. So the Duke is actually being possessed by a Valg king, like one of the original princes that came through the word gates, and while they were all pushed out, he was not, and he took possession of one of the dukes. Like, he was entombed to kind of keep him dead, and now he has taken over the Duke's body and is making all of these decisions. While this is happening, we also have Manon, who is in the mountains where the Duke, his castle is. So the witches that were part of the coven of witches that were there to start the war had been sacrificed kind of unwillingly by Manon at her grandmother's direction to breed with the Valg, because that's what the Duke wanted. She meets a young witch who is a servant, who is basically being enslaved by her uncle. She was originally like her parents were a duke and a duchess. They get killed by her uncle. He took the throne and the power and is working for Duke Parrington. Manon discovers that she is a witch, and so she kind of takes her under her wing, and Manon finds out at the end of the book that they are planning to use the witch girl, like one of the breeders, for the Valg. And at the end, she goes in, she rescues the girl, knowing that this is going to rupture the relationship between the witches and Duke Parrington. She goes and rescues her, and the woman who I haven't mentioned before, her name is Caltaine. She's someone that was helping Duke Parrington and Kane in the beginning of the series in book 1. She is married to Duke Parrington, and she was a courtier who didn't seem to have a whole lot of abilities, but has now been implanted with a word stone, and it amplifies her powers, her shadow magic, and she has been manipulated by the Duke to like suck the life out of people. Like, a village has been attacked with her powers and stuff. And so she basically decides that as her last stand, Caltaine does, as her last stand to get back at the Duke for all that he's done. She's going to essentially set the tower on fire with the shadow magic, burning herself, everybody alive there. Gets the word stone from Caltaine, and she says, take this to Celeana Sardathian. That is the update that I have for you. I will again come back to you when I have finished Empire of Storms, and I will say that I'm not excited to get to Tower of Dawn because I consistently still do not give a fuck about Cole. So the fact that we have a whole book with him and his side piece is not that interesting to me. How long this vlog is going to be, but I'll talk to you when I have finished Empire of Storms. Hi friends, we are going to make this quick because I wanted to give you a new area, a new background, but unfortunately we're in the south and it's hot as fuck here, so my AC is struggling. So I'm hot is what I'm saying. So I finished Empire of Storms, and again I'm gonna put it right there. Everybody knows what it looks like if you're at this point. Like, you probably already read the series. But okay, well, the spine's broken. This is what it looks like. Everybody knows this is what I'm talking about. Okay, I gave this 4 stars, and I really don't know how to talk about this because I enjoyed it, but I don't know, like, not a lot went on. Sarah J. Maas has this fantastic way of, like, pulling her plot along in a way that keeps you entertained, but without actually making a lot of meaningful things happen. And by the end of the book, you're kind of just like, oh, I remember the end. But, like, the middle shit, can't remember. No idea. So Aelin and her posse are on their way to Terrasen, and when they get there, the lords of Terrasen, who have kind of been like controlling the area, to basically tell her, like, we don't recognize you as the queen, you've been gone away for so long, like, you hid yourself away for 10 years, and you need to do something to prove to us that you're loyal. And while she's in Terrasen, she gets notified that Rifthold, where Dorian is now the king, is being attacked by Manon and her wyverns. And so she sends Rowan out there to get Dorian, make sure that he is safe, and take him to Skull's Bay. We done? Are we done? And so Skull's Bay is where the pirate captain Rolf stays. So in the Assassin's Blade, there was a story where her and Sam go to Skull's Bay to unwittingly cargo of slaves, and then they get there and they end up freeing the slaves, and it like pisses Captain Rolf off. So she's gonna go there to kind of convince him to join them, because she has to go to Ilium or something like that. It is this place that has sort of been abandoned, but there's a temple there to Mala, whatever the goddess is that she's like has inside of her, or she's a descendant of, or whatever. While they're at the temple is where she sees the apparition of the old king, who tells her that the lock is in this marsh, and you need that lock to basically, you know, send the word gate, close the word gates or whatever. So they get to Skull's Bay and they start getting attacked by Erwin. She ends up saving Captain Ralph, securing his like troops. They fight off the Valg, and then they end up going to the marsh to get the key that she needs. Okay, like I said, it's hard to like decipher all this shit, and I'm not doing a very good job, I'm sorry. And Maeve is attacking because they found out early in the book that the Queen Maeve is moving her armada or whatever, and they don't know why. At this point, they now have Maeve's whole crew of Rowan's friends because they're looking for Lorcan, who disobeyed their queen's wishes, and now they're supposed to kill him. But they team up with the band of misfits or whatever to help her, because they like the order by Queen Maeve is like isn't airtight, so they are able to have a little bit of freedom. And then they all run into Lorcan and Elid, who have been, Elid is the chick that Manon saved. They met up in the forest, and they have been traveling together on like carnival and all this other shit to like go where they're going, because she's trying to meet Aelin. Lorcan is trying to see Aelin as well to get these keys, and they all meet up at this marsh. And then Queen Maeve attacks, and Manon comes. Well, Manon's already there. They save Manon's life, and then the 13 show up, And all of these different armies and all of these life debts that Celeana or Aelin has accrued over her lifetime, all these people that she's helped, she kind of calls in and basically says, you owe me, come fight with me, and, you know, whatever. So, what did we learn? So several things went on in the background. First of all, Lorcan and I love Elodie. I love their relationship. I think they're so cute. I like Lorcan. Didn't to begin with. I thought he was kind of a creep. He was kind of just gross. He was obsessed with Maeve. Didn't like him, but liked their relationship. She's cool. Manon ended up breaking away from the Blackteeth, wow, which is because she disobeyed, during the Rifthold attack, she disobeyed her grandmother's orders to get Dorian, to kill Dorian. She disobeyed them by killing whatever the other a Yellowlegs witch, and saving Dorian, but they don't know she saved Dorian, or she's like doesn't want to think that she saved Dorian. So because she killed that Yellowlegs witch, they're gonna sentence her to death, but instead the matron of the Yellowlegs says, like, I'll take her second instead. So her second, Astrid, is supposed to die. And so she's like, okay, well, I will be the one to execute her. And when they go to the execution block, she ends up killing her grandmother, or trying to kill her grandmother. Does she kill her grandmother? I can't remember. And she gets gutted, like her grandmother slices her stomach open. And all of the 13 run. They get Astrid out, they run away. And it is revealed to Manon that she is the last Crochan queen, that her mother and her father were princes and princesses of, like, the Crochan and Blackteeth line, and they had Manon, and Manon was supposed to bring peace to the clans and remove the curse, or break the curse that's on their land, that they've been killing all the Crochans in retaliation for this curse. And so her grandmother killed them, and so she took Manon in and raised her as, like, this Crochan killer, even though that's her family. And so Manon and the 13 hear this, and the 13 get away. Manon gets off on Abraxas. She's gutted, and she tells Abraxas, I need help. She passes out. Abraxas shows up at the ship that everybody is holding, and Manon is now part of the group. She has, like, a sexual relationship with Dorian, which I have to say is, like, the most interesting that Dorian's been since the beginning of the series. So she has this relationship with him. She's working alongside the crew. Her 13 show up at the end battle, and then at the very end of the book, they've defeated the forces. All of these people have come in, and Aelin gets taken by Maeve. She gets a collar put on her. She gets put in this iron box, or a mask. She gets put on this iron box. She gets whipped, and she gets taken. And so she knew that this prophecy that has kind of been prevalent throughout the series meant that she would lose all of her power to get rid of the gods who were supposed to be going back through the gates, the Valg King, getting all the Valg out, closing the word gates, like all of that she knew would take all of her power, and that she would be powerless, she would be mortal, she would lose everything essentially for this cause, and she knew that. So she put a plan in place to make sure that Terrasen is safe going forward. She married Rowan. She set up a plan with Lysandra the shapeshifter to continue to be Aelin after Aelin is gone, and she just made sure that Terrasen can continue to thrive and grow and fight evil and all that when she's gone, with the intention of them not saving her from the queen. So at the end of the book, we see Dorian going off with Manon and her 13 to find the Crochan witches to help. We saw Lysandra and Aelin going back to Terrasen. Lysandra is now disguised as Aelin, so all of the forces think that Aelin is alive. They're gonna go back to Terrasen, and then Rowan and Elodie, and I think maybe Lachlan. I don't know if Lachlan is gonna be there or not, but they're going to go save Aelin from Queen Maeve. So that is what we learned. I am now going into, what is it, Tower of Dawn, and I think I said in a previous clip I'm not excited for it. I might have to get the audiobook because being in the head of Cole for 600 pages is not my idea of a good time. So, again, I've been talking forever, and a bunch of it was incoherent because that's kind of how it is. I just like spew my thoughts until I get a train of thought going, and then we become coherent again. So, we'll talk after I've read Tower of Dawn. It might be a while. This has already taken me a month, so. I know I said I wanted to update you when I'm done, because this vlog is insanely long, but I think it's worth noting that we are 30 pages into Tower of Dawn, and we've gotten more description of this kingdom, the gods, the royal family, than we have gotten for anything. Not Terrasen's family, not like Terrasen's royal line, not the gods of the Aelin kingdom, the gods, like we've got nothing from them. But 30 pages of a kingdom that I cannot imagine is going to be the main character or going to have any main characters. We've gotten that. Is it important? Probably not. Why am I reading it? I don't know. I finished Tower of Dawn, and mostly I'm wondering why this was 600 pages instead of a novella. And I gave it 3 stars. That's very generous. Honestly, I'm thinking of bumping it down to a 2. This was entirely pointless. We came away with Cole marrying the healer that Aelin helped in Assassin's Blade. They are magically bound, only be able to walk if her magic is strong enough. Nezarene or whatever, they broke up. They ended their relationship, and she's with the prince of this other continent, Kaigan, something like that, where this whole book took place. She's with their prince. I feel like I've wasted my time. I'm not happy that I read 600 pages of building a kingdom and a world and their own like history when that's irrelevant, when they were literally just on the island or the continent for nothing, because none of the war is taking place there. Like, they figured out some stuff that's relevant to the plot, but 90% of it was pointless. Still don't like Cole, still think he's boring. Nezarene and her boo are cool, I guess. We found out that Maeve is actually a Valg queen. Okay, my tantrum's over. I repressed my disappointment, and I'm ready to start. What is this called? This Kingdom of Ash. Oh my god, it's almost 1,000 pages. But I quite literally have never paid any attention to people talk about the series, talk about this ending. So I don't know what to expect. Like, I don't know if people like this, people don't like this. I don't know anything. I've never bothered to learn, never bothered to listen. So I'm going into this with no idea if I'm going to be disappointed or not. I'm excited to be back with the crew. I'm upset that we had that 600 page break away from Aelin and everything that's going on there, because I do think that plotline is much more interesting. I'm now going to start this behemoth. I don't know when I'm going to update you. I don't know if I'm going to take a break or what my decision is. Like, I have been reading this series for so long. It's taken me over a month. So I didn't love the last one. I'm going into Kingdom of Ash very hopeful, and we'll see how the ending to the series wraps up, and then I'll talk about the series and my feelings on it as a whole. So, I have finished Kingdom of Shadows. I'm done with the Throne of Glass series. But before we get into the Throne of Glass series and my thoughts, let's talk about Kingdom of Ash. So, I ended up giving this 4 stars. I definitely liked it a whole lot more than the 1 through 3 stars, but it definitely wasn't a 5-star fantasy for me. So I would say there's 3 different conflicts going on, 3 different points of view that we're following. And we're following our whole host of characters. They all pretty much get points of view at some point, but it's all centered around these 3 different events. So we have Aelin, who is getting tortured by Maeve. We have Rowan and that crew who is going to get Aelin, and eventually they meet up and they come together. We have Manon, the 13, and Dorian, who are trying to bring in the Crochan witches. And yes, I recognize that I have been pronouncing it wrong this whole time, but I hate the way it's actually pronounced. And then we also have Aelin and Lysandra, who are constantly fighting the whole book. They're fighting. I'll address their group first because I feel like it's easiest. I personally love Aelin and Lysandra. I love Aelin. I understand people who don't, especially after this book, because he was not the best partner. He was not the best love interest. He said some very terrible things to Lysandra. I personally agree that they were terrible, but given what he's gone through and what they're actively going through in this book, I understand it. He's on the losing side of a battle. He thinks he's going to die any day. He has a lot of feelings of guilt towards Aelin, towards Terrasen, and to Lysandra. He doesn't feel like he's good enough for Lysandra, and he thinks that he's failing. And he's losing people left and right. They're all dying. And so he has these moments where he lashes out to Lysandra. I don't think his groveling was necessarily good enough. Like his "I'm sorry" was literally just "I'm in love with you." And they kind of moved on. So I don't necessarily think that what he did amounted to an apology that was worthy of forgiveness. But I definitely don't think that he's like irredeemable. Personally, aside from Manon, I found his character to be the most compelling. I love characters that struggle. Like, if you were to ask me my favorite character in any book, any TV show, any anime, any manga, like, it's always going to be the character that struggles. It doesn't matter. It does matter. And Aelin is constantly getting berated, constantly getting shit on in this book. Did I necessarily like that we didn't get a whole lot of relationship growth, given that they have a marriage and HEA at the end of the book? Not necessarily. I like their relationship, but I don't agree that we got enough. So then we have the half that is Dorian, Manon, the Crochan witches, and the 13. Manon for me is the highlight of this series. From the book that she comes in to the very end, she's fantastic. Her character growth is some of the best that I've seen from Sarah J. Maas, and I think she's just a standout character. She goes from this ruthless person who feels this like soul deep connection with Abraxas, her wyvern, and it opens her eyes to this whole world, to the corruption that's going on around her, to helping people. And I love the way that her character went. I love where she ended up. I don't love the ambiguous ending with her. I don't love that we didn't get some closure on the Dorian and Manon relationship, that we didn't get some closure with how Manon, as the Crochan Queen and the Iron Teeth Queen, I don't like that we didn't get a closure on how that went for her. Dorian for me was probably a character in the beginning of the series. I didn't love him. At the end of the series, I didn't love him. Like, I acknowledged the growth that he went through. He by no means was the most boring character. In typical Sarah J. Maas fashion, he's like all powerful. We then have Cole Nezarine, his wife Irene, whatever, like I forgot to mention them. They're back from the Kaigan continent. Like, all 3 of these characters are just boring. Like, there's nothing about them that I really enjoy. Every time we went to their point of view, I really wanted to skip it. I don't love that Irene is like the ultimate life giver, the greatest power out there. I don't love that, just because she's not a character that we had enough time to care about, I guess. It just seemed like a plot convenience. And then we have Rowan, Elodie, Lorcan, Aelin, Fenray, and Gavril. So, Rowan, consistently, I don't give a fuck about him. I find him to be very boring. He is a Rhysand experiment. Rhysand, like, he's the failed project that eventually becomes Rhysand, in my opinion. He has no personality beyond being in love with Aelin. He has nothing, essentially. So I don't love him. I find him to be boring, and I don't like Aelin and Rowan together. I find their relationship to be very boring. Yeah, so then let's talk about Lorcan and Elodie. Elodie. Every name that I could possibly pronounce wrong except Cole, I have pronounced wrong. But we're just gonna, whatever. I love their relationship. I think that their relationship was developed the most. I really enjoyed their relationship. They're very, very cute. Do I think everybody needs to be mates? No, but I enjoyed their relationship. Aelin, I don't like her. I mean, I spoke to the fact that she has a really, really intense character arc from the beginning, but I still don't like her. I think she's boring. She just is. Like, she's all powerful. She's all powerful. She has all the answers. She's always the smartest person in the room. She always has some secrets up her sleeve. I find her character to be boring. Erwin, whatever. I don't think he got enough page time. Like, I'm kind of upset that the biggest villain in the book was killed in literally 4 pages, and it was through the power of friendship and healing. Don't love that. Maeve, again, was kind of boring. We got a little bit more character development for her. We got a little more backstory that I enjoyed. I don't necessarily think that all villains need to be redeemed in some way or have a backstory that makes sense, but I do enjoy that was her backstory. I do have an issue with the fact that Erwin just wanted to take over the world, and that was enough, but Maeve had to be given this, like, sad backstory about how she was imprisoned and all that kind of stuff. I guess that made her more relatable to Aelin and to Elodie, but it just, like, so then that leads us to the end. Sarah, bring it in. Miss Jeanette, bring it in. Okay, too close. Kill some of your fucking characters. The ending to me made no sense. This is 1,000 pages, and collectively this is probably 5,000 pages, and you didn't kill a single main character. Not a single one. You killed the 13, which was sad, but completely unfucking necessary because they all died but Manon. That made no sense. And you killed Gavril. You literally reunited this man with his son, and he died a page later. You tear the page and he's dead. Just to give Aiden that, like, final push to, like, push through the war, because he'd literally been shit on this entire book. I don't understand it. I don't get it. And it lowers the stakes because you don't freaking kill anybody. Like, I knew that all of the main gang was gonna live, so I didn't give a fuck. I don't believe any stakes that are established in Sarah J. Maas's books because everybody freaking lives. And the ending was just lame. We got so much ambiguity. We didn't get answers for any of our characters. We really could have used, like, a 10-year skip to see how everything went, because it was literally like a week later after the war. Say bye to everybody. They had their emotional goodbyes, and that's it. Like, it just was a very lame ending. Like, that last portion after the battle was lame, and I think altogether the book itself was just a little lackluster. Like, a lot of it was fighting. We would get some, like, big reveals of things that Aelin's kept in her back pocket without telling anybody, and that was how the plot went, and it just was too long. It was just too long. It was too much, but I am done. So now let's talk about my thoughts on the series, how they relate to other Sarah J. Maas series. First and foremost, I don't like that every relationship has to end in a mating. I don't like that every character has to be in a relationship. I don't like that every relationship has to be straight. I think her tropes that she follows are so, like, overdone, and the way that every relationship in this story was straight was so glaringly obvious because she had to make every character have a mate. The only people that didn't end up with someone at the end of this was Fenrir. We're gonna call him Fenrir. Fenris, whatever the hell his name is. In relation to the other series, because I have read the first 3 books in the ACOTAR series, I don't know if I'll ever read the novella and the other book, and I have read Crescent City, both books. So I guess eventually I'm gonna have to read the newest books in the ACOTAR series, if I plan to continue in her world. For a YA series that was written in early 2010s, I think it was good. It's very reminiscent of other fantasy series. I'm pretty sure the last book was written pretty recently. While I can see the development of her stories, I don't necessarily think that she's cut out for these high fantasies. They're never really as well fleshed out, well developed as I thought. I think that the fact that all of her worlds connect in the last Crescent City book is making everybody feel like they're a little bit more thought out than they are. And I will admit, like in this book, I did see the ties to the other series. I think she just knew at a certain point that she wanted to bring them in, because I could tell that some of the world building and things that she did with these, especially the first part, wouldn't fit in, and it kind of changed as the series went on. In relation to the other series, I think this one is the strongest as far as like the plotting, things like that. Crescent City is a freaking mess. ACOTAR was very loose, I would say. It definitely focuses more on the romances than the world and all of that, and I definitely think that Throne of Glass was altogether well executed. It's not something that I'm gonna reread, and I think at one point I was thinking about it, but towards the end, because I had been reading it for so long, I can't see myself rereading it. I don't think the conclusion was satisfying enough. Let's go over my overall ratings for this series. So I gave Assassin's Blade a 4 out of 5 stars. I think this is a well-needed addition to the Throne of Glass series. I gave Throne of Glass 3 stars. I enjoyed this a lot more than I did the first time, but as far as the scope that this world gets to, I don't necessarily think that this is the most verbose. I gave Crown of Midnight 3 stars. Again, this is essentially the same thing as Throne of Glass. This focuses a lot on, frankly, 2 characters that I don't particularly care about, but we can see that the world is sort of opening up. I gave Heir of Fire 3 stars. I think this is kind of the turning point for the series for me. Even though I gave this 3 stars, I think that this is really where it starts, the glimmers of a good high fantasy series kind of come through. I gave Empire of Storms 4 stars. I really enjoyed this one. I think this is probably one of the best in the series. I found that in this one and Queen of Shadows, the character development of Aelin and watching her come into her own was very good. I gave Tower of Dawn a very, very, very generous 3 stars. I think this is probably the most pointless use of 600 pages that I have ever seen. This could have easily been 100 pages and I would have been just fine. And then lastly, I gave Kingdom of Ash 4 out of 5 stars. So that is it. That is the entirety of the Throne of Glass series. Overall, my average rating for this would probably be like a 3 star. I did enjoy it. I think it's a great YA fantasy. It's not something that I probably will return to time and time again. But overall, I am very glad that I read it, and I'm excited to continue more in the Sarah J. Maas world. I likely will be doing the same thing for the ACOTAR series and Crescent City. Let me know down in the comments how you felt about Throne of Glass when you read it. Is it nostalgic for you? I'm assuming if you've made it all the way to the end, you have read it. But I would love to hear your thoughts regardless. Let me know down below, and if you have nothing to say, leave a sword emoji down in the comments, and I will catch you guys in my next one. Thanks for watching this probably unbelievably long reading vlog.